Hi, I'm Bob Kieserman for Kids Place. Today we're joined by Dr. Abigail Gewirtz, prominent psychologist and author of When the World Feels Like a Scary Place. Dr. Abby is foundation professor in the Department of Psychology and Reach Institute at Arizona State University, where she has devoted her career to developing and testing award-winning skill-based parenting programs that promotes children's resilience. So, Dr. Gewirtz, thank you for joining me today. And I guess the first question we should ask is, tell us about your book. Why did you write the book for children and coping with the things that the world frightens most adults about?
Well, first of all, Bob, it's a treat to be here. Thanks for hosting me.
Thank you.
Um, I the idea for the book was hatched around 2016, 2017, although it took me a couple of years to get going on it. I don't know what you would say if I asked you whether you feel that the world has become a scarier place, but I have rarely. Yes, you would. Exactly. I was going to say I actually have rarely been in front of an audience where most, if not all, hands don't go up when I ask people, do you feel that over the past decade or so, the world has felt more and more like a scary place? We know from hard data that children and adolescents are feeling more and more anxious and depressed and suicidal. And parents don't really know what to do. And I'll give you a sort of short example. When I met with my publisher at Workman Press for the first time to talk about the book, she's a young woman, and she said to me, before you start telling me about the book, my son is in kindergarten, and I got an email from the school yesterday to say they're starting lockdown drills tomorrow. What am I supposed to say to my child? And of course, there's a conversation in the book about lockdown drills. But my goal in the book was to give parents a kind of a roadmap for how to talk about things that kids feel scared about. And by the way, grown-ups too. Grown-ups are pretty terrified about what's going on in schools these days with school violence and lockdown drills, as well as about the climate calamities that are happening, the huge divide in our country between, the political divides, the social divides in our country, other kinds of prejudice and violence that are happening, social media bullying, and all the difficult things that are happening around the incessant access to news, the news cycle, and not so news as well. And so I wanted to write a book to help parents, really to give parents not so much a script, but some ways to approach helping kids deal with things that engender big feelings. And that's the book.
Okay. Um, Very interesting. Certainly well needed, I'm sure. Tell me about your own background. I understand that over your lifetime, you've experienced some unsteadiness of the world and very personally. And how has that affected the work that you're now doing with the kids?
I actually feel privileged, Bob, to have grown up at a pretty stable time. When I think about my parents and my grandparents, my grandmother was extremely fortunate to be able to escape Nazi Germany because she married an Englishman who was able to save her and her brother and her parents, and most of the rest of the family perished. My father was a child of World War II. He was 4 years old when the war broke out, and he spent the next 5 to 6 years of his early childhood going from pillar to post outside London, staying with people because it was safer and because all the children of London were evacuated. And so I became really interested, and interestingly enough, my great-grandfather, back in 1918, I should say, was a victim of the Spanish flu epidemic and died, leaving my great-grandmother with 5 young children at the age of 32, I think. And so it's not that scary things haven't happened throughout life. When I was a young mother during 9/11. And I opened the book by talking a little bit about the experience of being a mother to a 5, 6-year-old who had some really interesting responses to 9/11 and how to talk with him and all his friends about what happened. None of us are strangers to difficult events happening in the world. But somehow, with the advent of new technology, parents today are dealing with things that I never had to deal with when my children, who are now in their teens and 20s, had to deal with.
Right. So what does a parent tell a child when the child becomes aware of events like the war in the Ukraine, mass shootings, the monkeypox, going into a movie theater and people are being shot? What do you tell your child?
Right. And you don't even have to think too hard to come out with all those examples, right, Bob?
I don't.
Sadly.
Sadly, I don't.
Sadly. Yeah. Yeah. So I would say the first thing is you don't tell your child. The first thing you do is you keep track of what you're feeling, you check in with how you are doing, and then you listen to your child. So that's sort of the way I structure the book. Really, the first chunk of the book is thinking about who I am as a parent, what my values are as a parent, what are the values I want to convey to my child. When I'm older and my child is grown up, what do I want them to remember me for and by? And what happens to me when I experience bad things happening? And those can be daily hassles like being cut off on the highway or your boss talking to you in a way that's disappointing or upsetting. And they can be really profound things, as we saw at when we had the onset of the COVID pandemic and people were getting sick and dying and really, difficult, really awful things were happening to many people. So the most important thing to do is to really figure out how you, and by the way, your co-parent, respond to events. And I distinguish responding from reacting and encourage people to think about what their immediate reactions are. And because an immediate reaction might be, I'm furious when my child's teacher calls me and said they were caught bullying another child in the playground. I'm so sad I can't stop crying when I hear that my neighbor's mother is in the hospital with COVID and is not likely to live. I'm shocked and horrified. So those are reactions. And all too often we act our reactions out. So we react. We don't just experience the emotion, we react. And yet we all understand that regulating the big emotions we have is absolutely crucial for everyday life. We do it at work. We don't scream at our boss when we're angry with them. We take a moment to breathe or walk outside and think through what might do. And we tend to do that a little bit less at home because we feel more comfortable. But that is, that the home is, as my colleague, as one of my dear colleagues would always say, the home is the crucible for strong emotions. And so we need to think about not just how we tend to experience emotions and act on them, and not just how we respond, how we ourselves regulate our emotions, but what kinds of things get us going versus our co-parent. I might be particularly sensitive to issues of bullying because I myself was bullied as a child. My husband might be particularly sensitive to issues of climate because he lost his home in a wildfire when he was a child, as an example. And so that's the first thing we need to do. When something happens, when our child storms into the house, throws down their backpack and bursts into tears, and it's going to be about something that happened on the playground, take a moment to check in with yourself. Because what happens if you don't is what I would call a red light conversation. And it could be something like, how could you just dump your backpack on the floor? Haven't I told you, you close the door, don't slam it. Look, there's already paint dropping off because you slam the door all the time. And then what will happen? Your child will just yell and cry and run upstairs to their bedroom and slam the door. And then you've got another problem on your hands. And so the first step is that checking in with yourself and regulating your own emotions. And the second is just taking a moment instead of talking to observe. I might say to you, Bob, wow, I can see from your crying that you are really sad about something. Where are you feeling it in your body? I don't know what 6-year-old Bob might say. What might 6-year-old Bob say?
It's as you're speaking, I'm thinking about how important it must be for parents to give the right model for their children. Is in essence, I think that's what you're alluding to.
It's not just model. Listen, if I'm not regulated, how can I expect my child to be regulated? We know kids learn about emotions in 3 ways, right? Don't tend to learn about them in school, although schools are doing better these days. They watch us. They watch us get angry or sad, and they watch how
Right,
we deal with our big emotions. But they also learn from how we respond to them.
right,
And then the third way they learn about emotions is the discussions that we have around the dinner table about emotions or in other places. And so, what I'm highlighting when I say, Bob, 6-year-old Bob, you're crying, where do you feel it in your body? Is that I am giving Bob a chance to tell me to put a spotlight on how he's feeling. 6-year-old Bob might say to me, I have butterflies in my tummy, or my tummy really hurts because I'm so sad and also embarrassed because, the kids left me out and on the bus they were laughing at me. And so, what you are teaching Bob by saying, where do you feel it in your body, is emotions are things that we show on our face
right,
because I saw you crying, and so I inferred that you were sad. And there are also things that we feel in our bodies. I feel sweaty when I get worried. My palms are sweaty. My heart beats fast. I get butterflies in my tummy when I'm worried about something, etc. And so that's sort of the second phase. And you know what? Have I talked to you, Bob? Have I talked at you at all yet? 6-year-old Bob.
no,
Not a thing. So that's why when you said to me, what do you tell your child? Nothing yet. First, I take time to make sure I'm regulated. That's
right,
the modeling part. And then I ask the child, I then help the child identify and label his emotions or her
right,
emotions.
right,
Then I listen. Wow, no wonder sorry, before I listen or while I'm listening, I validate. Wow, no wonder you're feeling sad and embarrassed. I would feel that way if it was me too. And like I remember when I was your age, Bob, and kids were so cruel to me. I remember one time they took something that was really a special thing that I had and they threw it around, and you're validating. So you're letting your child know his emotions are very important.
right.
That's that. Then I'm saying, tell me about what happened. Come sit down. So he might still be crying, he might not be crying, but let's have a snack and sit down and tell me about it. And it's only really at the last phase of our conversation. And even then, I'm not just going to talk at him. We want to, as parents, we want to give solutions. Do A, B, C, and D, and everything will be okay. And that's not the way to bring up children who are independent and compassionate and confident, because
Sure.
they have to own the solution. And so the last phase of our conversation is going to be about the solution. But that's like just the last 20%. Most of it is helping my child navigate. What am I feeling? Where am I feeling it? It's a valid feeling. I want to listen. I want to tell my mom. My experiences are accepted and validated by my mom, and then, or my dad, and then, now let's find a solution.
Very good. Fascinating. Fascinating. How does one get your book?
Oh, anywhere books are sold, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, your local bookstore. You might have to order it, but it's available. Actually, it's sold in the US and in the UK and in Korea, different editions.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so anywhere the books are sold, and if you go on Amazon and you order it and you like it, post a review. Lots of people have. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us today. This has really been interesting discussion. You shared a lot of good information with parents, and I wish you well, and I thank you very much for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, Bob, for what you're doing.
I'm Bob Kieserman for the Kids Place, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.